Welcome back to the latest episode of MentorME. We've got the great pleasure of having Paul Spiers here from the new P&L Principle and Leadership. So Paul, great to have you here. Thanks for coming on. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jack. So I'm Paul Spiers, as you said. I run the new P&L Principles in Leadership and Business podcast and the new P&L Institute, which is a culture and leadership management consultancy that focuses on how we build ethical, authentic leadership into leaders today for the future of business.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on. And obviously, I know we connected, fairly recently. Obviously, we brought you on, and you're sort of one of our only actual leadership mentors on the website. So it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And really interested to dive a bit more into your background, what took you into leadership, also your experience in terms of, okay, well, you started with leadership now and going into leadership mentoring, but what actually took you on that journey to sort of call yourself a mentor and start coaching others onto getting better? So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you.
So what is the background? Tell me the story.
So I've had around about a 30-year career in brand and reputation management, much of it as an entrepreneur, working in my own businesses, establishing consultancies and agencies. The lead up to the new P&L, if you like, around 8 years ago, I had a very successful brand communications consultancy. We were subject to a series of quite unethical actions from a client that took the business to its knees and me to my knees personally.
Yeah.
In the middle of that, being a sort of creative at heart, I came up with this idea for a new P&L, that there's got to be a better way of doing business than what we were subjected to at that time. So the new P&L would be principles and leadership, not just profit and loss. I hung on to that idea for a while, couldn't really find a vehicle to deliver it, but I knew, as with some other ideas, I knew there was something in it. There was a strength to that idea. And then around 3 years ago, the idea of a podcast and the idea of a new P&L merged in the back of my dusty brain. And I thought, well, I'll just dip my toes in the water, see if it would work, see if it would resonate and people would be interested in what a new P&L looked like in business. Launched the podcast. That grew exponentially. We now sit well in the top 5% in the world in terms of streams and downloads, which isn't bad for a niche kind of leadership podcast. So on the back of that success, I launched the new P&L Institute around 2 years ago. And that really brings together my personal experience as an entrepreneur, the leadership skills I've learnt over those 30 years in business, but also all of the learnings and the understanding and the knowledge I've taken away from nearly 230 episodes of the new P&L podcast. So it's a combination of all those things coming together into the Institute. And we deliver workshops, we deliver mentoring and training and executive coaching, all with a focus on how we bring leaders into a more transformational style of leadership, how we build more purpose-led businesses, because I believe they are the characteristics that will define the future of business. That's what we need to ensure that business aligns itself with the needs of community and the needs of the business of the future.
Incredible. And I think you touched on some really exciting points there I'd like to dive into, actually. So I think the first one would be hearing a bit more about what were the challenges. You said the business came to its knees and that sort of took you on a journey. I think that's really important as well, because I think with a lot of mentors, if you only have it through the successful periods, it's very difficult to mentor someone when they're like, damn, I don't know, like I'm stuck. I really need some help. Because if you haven't experienced that, it's very difficult to sort of pass your knowledge on. So what took the business to its knees? How did you recover? And obviously it made you stronger for it. So what were the learnings from that for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's anyone who says that they've only had success in business is
liar.
I'd probably avoid them.
It's an Andrew Tate.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a very tough time with that business. That wasn't as a result of our actions, but as I said, over a 30-year career, I've had other businesses. Some have been very successful. Others, I had a midlife crisis at 45, set up a surfwear clothing brand. I've got clothing for the rest of my life, but that failed. But I learnt a lot from that as well.
Yeah.
And I think when you're struggling with a business, your creativity comes to the fore, the way you try to get your product or service into the hands of customers. You've got to think a lot more intently about that. I think there's a resilience that comes to the fore with business that is struggling. I think the whole social media element of sort of standing in front of a Ferrari will accelerate your business by 10 times, I think sets up a false narrative for many young entrepreneurs. And it is very, very hard work, but it is also incredibly rewarding. And I think you've got to go into that entrepreneurial journey or that business or that leadership journey with the attitude that everything gives me something that will take me further on my journey, even if in that moment it feels like it's the end of the world, whatever that thing happens to be. I've learned an awful lot and much more through my failures and through my successes, and the new P&L Institute is successful, but it's still growing, it's still new. There are still many, many struggles I have on this journey now, even though I'm in my early 50s. You would think I've probably learned it all by now as a business person, but I'm learning a whole new way of doing business, new ways of reaching clients, new ways of getting in touch with people, and innovation in terms of the way we deliver those services. So I think the day you think you've learned everything is the day you should really look at yourself in the mirror and think about the lack of self-awareness.
Yeah, I think it's the day your business stops growing, because I mean, like, there's always new social media platforms to sort of grow on. There's new people to reach out to. There's like new continents to dive on and grow your business. So I mean, anybody who thinks they know everything in business is lying, right? I mean, it's like you look at some of the successful entrepreneurs in the country. We were talking about Ben Francis before this. Yeah. He's had a mentor, and he's a billionaire now. So I mean, like, he's probably still got a mentor as well. So it's really exciting to see that. And I think, so you obviously touched on the Ferrari point. I think that is really bad for young entrepreneurs, because I think it gets painted this picture online on social media where it's a sort of a get rich quick scheme, and it's not. Yes. And I think also when you do that on social media, you don't build up a proper following of people that you want to follow, grow your business, and potentially be clients and get mentored by you. So I'm interested to hear a bit about, obviously, leadership coaching from like social media perspective for yourself, because it's not sort of something that is a Ferrari, it's not a nice lick of paint that people want to go straight to. Because I think with leadership, it's very personal compared to some of the other mentoring and coaching that we've got on the website. It's not like e-commerce where people are like, I can make some money, and do it quickly. Whereas it's like, I've got to look at myself personally, how I can grow myself and be a better leader for my employees, for my personal life. So interested to hear how you've tackled that from a social media perspective and grown, because obviously you said top 5% podcast in the world, which is really exciting, and congratulations on that. So I'm interested to hear how you've grown your brand.
Yeah. I mean, the point you raised about you can't grow your business until you grow yourself, that is the essence of what we're trying to deliver with the new P&L. And I have a ritual every Sunday where I sit down, I look at what I'm planning for the week. I look at it with a very self-critical eye, what we're trying to achieve, where the motivation for that desire or achievement comes from, because everything has to come back to the purpose of what I'm trying to deliver in my business. And there are plenty of things I could be doing, and plenty of things that I could also be doing from an ego perspective, because I want to show myself on social media or blast this out or tell people how well I'm doing. And so that Sunday is all about casting that critical eye on the real motivations behind what I'm trying to deliver that week. And that's really a microcosm of what we try to do with a mentoring program as well. Asking where people are coming from, what is the motivation for what they're trying to do, what is the purpose, and how do their actions relate to that purpose that they're trying to deliver in their business. And purpose gets a bit of a bad rap. It's considered fluffy sometimes, and a lot of businesses perhaps dismiss it as well. And for those who do, or perhaps think that, I always say, well, what does a business without purpose look like? Because there's only a business with purpose or without. And so business without purpose, you have maybe employees that don't feel they share that business's vision. They may not be loyal. They may not be as productive because they're just turning up and doing their job. So if that's what a business without purpose looks like, then the principle of purpose is correct. It's how you deliver it, the way you create that vision, the way you inspire, and the way you seed that purpose into the business every day. And that's what I try to do. I don't always get it right, but that's what I try to do every Sunday, is to ask what those actions are, where the motivations come from, and how they align with the purpose of the business.
Yeah, and I think something you mentioned there is you can't always get it right. And I think, like, personally as well, from like my own personal perspective as an entrepreneur, is that without purpose, like, your motivation is nothing. It's difficult to motivate yourself if you haven't got a reason to get this business up and going. Sometimes the purpose can be for people make money. I mean,
of course, yeah.
But obviously I think if you're starting any business, there needs to be something other than just money, because you can always make money doing something else. So I think you start to drift away. And I think for us at MentorME, obviously our main purpose is to make an impact and change in terms of the way people find mentors, so they don't get scammed, allow for transparency, because I've got my own personal story with going through that. So I think that's really important. Obviously with the consulting side of the business, How does that differ to sort of normal sort of business leadership coaching, where people look at sort of business chemistry, they look at some of the other leadership styles? I think, like, I remember learning it at school, like with PE, like autocratic and things like that. How does that? How do you take what you do and make it different and innovate in obviously in leadership?
Well, I guess the clue's in the name, the new P&L, which is principles and leadership. So we come back to that purpose and that principle being the heart of everything you deliver. And of course, we look at the various styles or components of leadership, but then we look at those with a very critical eye again and say, out of all of those different areas of leadership, what is required for the future of business? And business can't just take from society. It has to be part of society if collectively business and society are to survive in the future, because we're at a critical time for the planet, we're at a critical time for society, misinformation, all these other things that are out there. So our focus is how we embed principles and purpose at the heart of that business, and the role that leadership plays in delivering that, and in creating a more inclusive culture that enables people to understand what those principles are, where it feeds into the value, where it feeds into the purpose, and then critically from our perspective, how that affects the commercial, the strategic, the operational arteries of that business. Because I think where the disconnect comes is when you have purpose over here and then the strategy, the operational and the commercial over here. And if those things are disjointed, we know where leaders and staff will go. They'll go towards the commercial, because you've got to make money, you've got to have profit. But if those things underpin one another and support one another, that's where there's that synergy comes from, if you like. So that's where our sweet spot is, if you like, using a new P&L to underpin the old P&L.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have the right foundations, because otherwise you're just building something like a Jenga tower and it's built wrong and it just collapses. So you really need to underpin, like you've said there, with having the purpose built throughout the whole business. And I think that's really exciting, especially to see how businesses will change when they start to adopt these new styles. So what is some of the success stories maybe that you've seen with people that are not just come through the mentoring? We'll come to the mentoring in a little bit, but around the consulting side, what are some of the success stories that you would say that you've personally been proud of in terms of the change that you've implemented by supporting their business? Like, I can imagine people happier, they're enjoying their job a bit more, they're obviously financially doing better off with the business because there isn't as much. I'm trying to think of what maybe operational drag might be the right word. I think you probably get a lot of people slowing down, the efficiencies go when there isn't that purpose and motivation to run it.
I mean, the best successes from my perspective, clearly you want to have a more successful business, but it's the personal achievements that I've worked with people who then feel reinvigorated within their business, who feel that they have a renewed sense of purpose, who are not regretting going into work every day or waking up every morning and thinking, God, it's another day, or struggling with an entrepreneurial challenge. That doesn't mean that those things don't go away, but it's changing individuals' perspective on what that thing means in that moment. So for me, my personal successes are around changing the attitudes and the perspectives of the individual. You can't change, the old Stoic argument, you can't change everything around you, but you can change the way you look at it. And that's the personal achievement from my perspective, seeing people taking the things that they may have seen in a negative 6-9 months ago, seeing it as a positive, and then generating more business as a result of it, just because of perspective and the way they approach that challenge or that opportunity.
That's got to be really rewarding, especially getting to the end of that sort of 6-9 month period, and also just seeing people come out of it with a renewed sense of motivation. Because I mean, they will hit the same challenges again, because it's like always going to happen with business, but they now know another way to go through it, right? Instead of just going, okay, keep knocking on the same door with the same attitude and it not changing. So,
and there's an awful lot of loneliness in leadership. I think particularly in the small to medium size, you feel when you become that leader, whether it's accidental, if you like, whether you've been promoted through, or whether it's purposefully because you've become an entrepreneur, huge amount of loneliness. There's a huge amount of belief that now that you're a leader, you have to have all the answers rather than still ask questions. You are nervous about bringing some of your peers into that conversation because you feel you should be directing them rather than asking them for their views, for their opinions, to create a more democratic approach to leadership. So I think mentors serve a very valuable role, because leaders are the same as all of us. We carry the same emotions, the same insecurities, the same apprehensions. We're worried about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So that mentor role, that leadership role, that support role that we play is often just giving someone a voice, and they may make their own decisions out of that. We may not even advise them on certain occasions, but it's the confidence to have a voice, to test something in a safe environment, to use that, that common word now. It's removing some of that loneliness that exists with leadership, whatever the size of the business happens to be.
I think that's a really good point, actually, because I think it's especially around loneliness, right? Because obviously entrepreneurship it's you starting a business, and especially even when you start to, if it starts to grow quite quickly underneath it, with obviously startups fail, but usually the ones that become successful do grow quite rapidly.
Yes.
Especially for me at a young age as well. I think obviously I want to get to a point where I've got staff, and it's also one of those things where I think sometimes you doubt yourself as a leader. It's like, okay, am I in a position to actually lead these people? Obviously, I know my business inside out, but am I a leader? How? Because like there's things that I don't know, and there'll be things that you don't know. It's like, how do I keep going through those challenges every single day to make sure that I'm the best leader I can be for these people? And I think that sort of comes into the conversation around feeling like you're a pretender. And obviously confidence will take you through that, I think, and help you be a better entrepreneur, better leader. So that's really interesting. I think in terms of the challenges that you see a lot of these leaders face before they get started on the program, what are sort of some of the core ones that you see now in terms of people dealing with it because I imagine if people come out of a corporate environment into a startup business, a very different world. So I imagine the leadership changes for a lot of people. A lot of the challenges that people come through will be different for everyone. So any challenges that you might.
I mean, I think one of the interesting things is, to go back to your point, leadership's the most critical thing in business if it's to succeed, because it influences culture, operations, commercial, and everything else. But it's the only thing we don't study at secondary school. So we might be able to study business studies or whatever, and we might take sociology, we might do, financial services, whatever it happens to be. But no one's really teaching young people in a comprehensive way how to deliver leadership. So when someone comes into that entrepreneurial environment, either like you through a traditional entrepreneurship path, or maybe you come out of business because you're 40 and you want to do something, or you're forced to do it at 40 through being laid off, whatever the case may be, we can't really figure out what leadership looks like, what we're supposed to be. And I think that's the fundamental challenge that I see with people that come to us, is not necessarily that they haven't got a great idea or an idea the way business runs, but actually how do I shape this, not in my image, but with my vision. And that's a critical distinction as well, because you shape it in your image, becomes ego-driven and arrogant. You shape it with your vision, it can become inspirational and generate loyalty and engagement. So I think the biggest challenge is figuring out what leadership actually looks like and what it looks like for you. You're not Ariana Huffington, or you're not an Elon Musk, or whoever it happens to be. What does your leadership look like? What is your characteristics and value proposition inside you? What drives you as a person? How do you translate that to leadership? How do you refine it but still be true to yourself? To me, that's the biggest leadership challenge we have.
Yeah, and I think that's only going to become more difficult with the use of AI. I'm not sure if how much you've used it, but obviously everyone is now just bombarding ChatGPT and Bard and all of these different AI products. And I can imagine that, if people start turning to that for leadership styles, everyone is going to end up pretty much the same, unfortunately, because, everyone's going to just... I think I've seen it a lot on social media, not necessarily from leadership perspective, but with, I don't know, plans of things that they're posting or whatever. It just tends to be the same content, because if you put the same input in, the AIs tend to give you the same thing. So I think if it goes down that route in leadership, we could end up with a bit of a problem, because everyone's going to be sort of barking up the same tree, and then you lose your full individuality, right? Because everyone's the same using the same AI, and I think you're starting to see that with a few things. So interested to think, how do you see AI being adopted from a leadership perspective? Because I think if people are going to start relying on it too much I think something that I've seen is maybe people turning to AI instead of a mentor. And AI can only read what you give an input on, and maybe from a certain time period, but it doesn't draw on the personal experience of... The whole point of a mentor is that, the mentor that you're choosing has gone and done what you want to do. So obviously, if I want a leader, they've gone through a leadership process, and they've sort of discovered what type of leader they are, and they can sort of... Maybe you don't become the same leader as them, but you can see the transition that they've undertaken, and they can give you their advice on their experience. I think if if everyone goes through their AI route and turning away from mentors, I mean, it's going to become quite saturated of the same sort of people. So how do you see AI sort of fitting into the leadership and mentoring world?
I think in terms of leadership, I'm not concerned, because I think before AI, loads of people just made assumptions about what leadership should look like, or they worked for someone and they just developed the same characteristics, or they read a couple of books or searched online, whatever the case may be. It's only the same format in a different way. AI, you can put whatever you want in and it'll give you, as you say, it'll repeat back to you the collated or curated views of what leadership looks like. But that's no different to speaking to half a dozen leaders who maybe didn't have the right leadership style in the past. So I'm not concerned about that. What concerns me in a broad sense, and I deliver, one of the keynotes I deliver is called, Are We Outsourcing Our Curiosity to an Algorithm? And that's one of the concerns I have with AI, or anything else for that matter. I delivered that keynote well before the ChatGPT, is that we are outsourcing our natural sense of curiosity, our thinking processes, to algorithms, to AI, to whatever it happens to be. And we're taking at face value whatever we are fed online through an algorithm, whatever we're fed back to us through a ChatGPT equivalent machine, whatever it happens to be. I'm worried that we're losing our natural sense of curiosity, our natural sense of ability to contextualize what needs to be understood. That comes back to your point. What a AI delivery will never be able to provide is you as a mentoree talking to me as a mentor, and me thinking, back in 1999, I had the same problem.
Yeah.
This was my experience. This is what you could do, should do, maybe do, perhaps consider, adjust or influence accordingly. But it's not able to deliver that contextualized understanding of a one-to-one person having that conversation. Now, if you want to go to ChatGPT or DALL-E or Bard or whatever, then that's fine. People will have always done that. There's a plethora of business books out there that will give you one thing or another.
Yeah.
And there's perhaps a misconception that it's going to be quicker. But if you get all that information, you have to wade through to find the gems. Actually, the investment of speaking to someone once a week, once a fortnight, and getting straight to the point, rather than having to wade through dozens, hundreds, thousands of pages of curated information or business books or whatever, that's where the value is. And you also get context, you get to emotionally deliver your views or whatever it happens to be to your mentor, who can feed back to you. You have that one-to-one conversation that removes some of the loneliness. There's far more to the mentoring conversation than simply the delivery of factual or opinionated information from one person to another, or one laptop to a person, or whatever it happens to be. So for those who want to get it from AI, that's absolutely fine. And I'm sure there's a lot of gems and gold to be there.
Yeah.
But I don't see it as a fundamental threat to those people who genuinely deliver value and those people who are genuinely looking for value.
I think I completely agree, and I really like what you touched on there around sort of losing curiosity, because I think that would be a real shame as well, I think, for society in a whole, because I think if people stop having that curiosity, they stop innovating, which means sort of nothing moves forward, unfortunately. I think also that's sort of the reason we've touched on building MentorME, right? Because nobody wants to wade through hours and hours of either YouTube content, articles online.
Yeah.
Not everyone can read all the books. You've only got so much time in a day, right? You can't listen to a book all day, every day, and read books because you've got other things to do. So I think it is, it's really important to have a mentor, just to be able to get the direct information and build that personal relationship, because it's also what AI doesn't give you is a network as well. And I think a mentor opens up a whole set of doors into a new circle, maybe, or new clients, because maybe, I'm a leader and we're working together, and you've got people in your network that maybe have drawn on something else that I've got questions about. You ask them for me, and we all come around full circle. It's quite nice to build that network. And I think I've said it a lot, and it's quite regurgitated now, but it's really important, is that your network is your net worth. And I think a mentor definitely helps that grow, because it definitely opens a lot of doors besides the value that gets given from the knowledge, the connections, and all these different types of things. So that brings us on to mentoring. So what is your mentoring program? How is that structured? How does that work, and how do you find your clients?
So there's 3 different services, if you like. There's the trademark transactional to transformational leadership program, which is delivered in 2 different ways. Either we can go in to a business or an individual, deliver it over 2 days, and there's 7 different modules that we focus on within that. We also run a 8-week program, which is an hour and a half once a week each week, which we can deliver as well. So that's the flagship program, if you like, transactional transformational leadership program. We run a series of what we call micro workshops, 1-hour workshops that focus on specific areas of leadership, whether that's heroic leadership, whether that's are you powerless or powerful, how to build a brand with purpose on purpose. And there's a whole series. I think we've got about 8 or 9 of those micro workshops at the moment as well. And then there's obviously the one-to-one mentoring or executive coaching that we will deliver. And that's really bespoke to the client. We can deliver it weekly, fortnightly, whatever it happens to be.
The sort of situation is. In terms of the mini workshops, how have you found building those out and sort of packing those in? It's interesting to hear, because I think what I really like about that is they're personal, they're in person, or I don't know, do you sometimes do them? But I think what a lot of people then start to do when they start to have like hour sessions of workshops where it is sort of the same content that you're going to go over with a new set of people, and obviously you work within the workshop. The whole point is that it's working group, but I think a lot of people start to move into online courses and record an hour of content and then put it online on Udemy or something and charge somebody for that and don't get that personal relationship. So I really like how you've sort of kept it as a workshop in person or over Zoom where people can get that. So want to draw to a close then, just on the mentoring. Where can people book in with you? How can they get involved with the mentoring? And who is the mentoring for? What should somebody want to do, and what should the outcome they should be looking for if they want to come on the mentorship?
So you can find us going to principlesandleadership.com, or you can find the podcast, The New P&L, Principles and Leadership, and you'll find the links through there. Just go onto the contacts page, get in touch with us through there. In terms of what they should hope to get out of it, I think it depends what they're looking for a start. So if you take the micro workshops program, what we do with that's built on the basis of the New P&L to the Point episodes that we have, where we take 1 point from the interview that we have the previous week, and we build out the New P&L to the Point, a 10-minute analysis. And then we build a 1-hour workshop out of that. So if you look at those micro workshops, it's about taking small areas of leadership that we need to focus on. It could be maximizing the moment, for example. How do we bring ourselves into a moment within our business and become super present? And it's a 1-hour workshop that's entirely focused on tips and tricks around focusing on being super present and maximizing the moment that we have. So I can't give you a prescription as to what people will get out of it. It depends on what they're looking for and what they want. What I can commit to is that they will get me delivering a workshop for a business that I understand, because I've been in entrepreneurship 30 years. I've made loads of mistakes. I don't have all of the answers, but if they have a question, I'll go away and look for it. Probably not as efficiently as ChatGPT, but I will find it. And they'll get a personal relationship with someone who is genuinely invested in trying to help them build their business and change their own sense of perspective on their business as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for coming on. And if you guys ever want to book with Paul Spiers from the New P&L Principle and Leadership, you can either head to MentorME or directly to the website that Paul's mentioned there. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jack. Cheers, man.
Thanks.